When a woman shows up at an Alaskan police station stating that she was kidnapped, raped, and tortured, and then her assailant tried to load her onto a small bush plane, the police didn't know what to believe. But they soon realized that she was telling the truth. A beloved local was kidnapping women and releasing them into the woods to hunt them like wild game. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel and the place where we talk about all things true crime. I know I have been gone for a while. I am really hoping to make a comeback, and we're going to start that comeback by talking about a serial killer that many tend to forget even existed. As always, trigger warning to all viewers and listeners, as we are talking about sensitive material that has to do with rape and murder in this specific circumstance. This serial killer would be Robert Hansen, who was also known as the Butcher Baker. His crimes were something straight out of a horror movie, and Hollywood even created the movie Frozen Ground about him. As an avid hunter, Hansen would drive or fly his victims into the Alaskan wilderness, and then he would hunt them. As always, we are going to start by talking about Hansen's early life, and then we will get into his adulthood, his move to Alaska, the murders, and finally his capture. So let's get started. Robert Hansen was born in 1939 in Estherville, Iowa, to Christian and Edna Hansen. Hansen's father was a Danish immigrant who was a baker and was said to be a strict disciplinarian. When Hansen was a child, he was naturally left-handed, but his father would force him to use only his right hand. According to doctors, this is what would cause him to develop a stutter, and this stutter would be with him throughout the rest of his life. As an adolescent, Hansen also developed bad acne. The combination of his stutter and him suffering from bad acne led to bullying. Boys his age made fun of him because he didn't fit in, and girls constantly rejected him. The constant rejection from girls his age would play a large role in the hatred he had developed for women. With barely any friends, Hansen became a loner, and he had a lot of spare time to spend by himself. This is how he would develop his love of hunting. In fact, he would become quite good at it. He basically channeled all of his rage from rejection into the stalking and killing of animals. When Hansen turned 18 in 1957, he would join the United States Army Reserve. He would only serve 1 year before being discharged, but from what I have found, it was not a dishonorable discharge. After the reserves, Hansen became an assistant drill instructor at a police academy in Pocahontas, Iowa. Not long after he became a drill instructor, he would meet his future wife, and the two would marry in 1960. But being married didn't help soften the hatred Hansen had growing in his soul since he was an adolescent. He still felt mistreated by his community, and he would end up entering into a cycle of criminal acts and breaking the law. After his marriage in 1960, Hansen would help recruit a young baker to help him burn down the Pocahontas County Board of Education bus garage. However, the young man would eventually confess everything, and Hansen would be arrested for the crime. While Hansen was in prison, his wife would divorce him, leaving him truly on his own. He would end up serving 20 months of a 3-year sentence for arson. His prison sentence didn't teach him a lesson though, because when he was released, he would be arrested a couple more times for things like petty theft. Hansen would end up marrying again, and then in 1967, the two would move to Anchorage, Alaska, and they would have 2 small children. But this would not keep him from getting into trouble. Here is where Hansen would end up committing all of his murders. In Alaska, Hansen would open up a small bakery. This is why later on he would be known as the Butcher Baker. But it seemed that the locals liked Hansen. He seemed like a nice enough guy and family man. Moving to Alaska would not keep him out of trouble for long though. Hansen would be arrested again in 1971 because he was accused of attempted rape by a local housewife. Around the same time, he was also accused of rape by a prostitute. Even with all the trouble he was getting into, the locals seemed to continued to get along really well with the Hunter and Baker. It seems that they weren't concerned about it, or maybe they just didn't realize the trouble that he was getting into. So then in 1976, Hansen would be sentenced to 5 years in prison for shoplifting a chainsaw, but he would appeal this and he would just be released. He couldn't stay out of trouble. You would honestly think that after how many times he had run-ins with the law, the local police department would have been keeping a very close eye on him, but it would turn out that whatever he was doing just wasn't enough. So now we are going to start getting into the murders Hansen committed. Perhaps Hansen's urge to murder women came from all of the rejection he received when he was younger due to his stutter and his acne. However, I believe that Hansen also felt encouraged to move on to and go through with murder when he kept getting away with all of his small crimes, and he was spending very minimal time behind bars for it all. According to Hansen himself, he actually began murdering women in 1973. His crimes came to be something that many thought were too unimaginable to believe, like something straight out of a horror movie. How depraved does somebody really have to be to hunt down other human beings like animals? With the Trans-Alaskan oil pipeline being constructed near Hansen's small bakery, it increased the local nightlife in the area. This would create the perfect hunting ground for him. The area was full of prostitutes and exotic dancers, many of whom their families wouldn't be looking for them and they didn't know where they were at, so it made them the perfect victims for him. Apparently, from what Hansen remembers, he said his first kill was either a topless dancer or a prostitute from the area, who he had told he was taking back to his home. Once in the car, Hansen drove right past where he said he was taking the woman, and she would notice, but when she would try to escape, he would hold her at gunpoint. Hansen would end up stabbing her in the neck, and then burying her in a shallow grave somewhere. This poor woman's body would be found in 1980, but was not identified. At the time, nobody had even thought to look at Robert Hansen for the crime. This crime, his first in particular, may have ended up being his most tame, as it seems that once he would get started, it would be no holds barred for him, and he would begin subjecting the victims to much more than the first woman. His method of killing was quite unique. He would subdue women with a gun, and then he would rape them, torture them. He would keep them held hostage for a while, and then he'd either fly them or drive them out into the Alaskan wilderness. Hansen did have his own pilot's license and a small bush plane, so this is how he would end up doing this without being noticed. He would then let the women get ahead of him in the wilderness, in the woods, by letting them run, and then he would hunt them down using skills that he had learned from years of hunting wild game. Once he would find them, he would kill them with his .22. Throughout his time of crime, until he was apprehended, Hansen would admit to raping at least 30 women and killing 17 of them. Many of these women would be exotic dancers and prostitutes, like I said, who he felt like nobody would miss or end up looking for. Hansen's span of killing is known to have been from 1971 to 1983, but he wouldn't fly completely under the radar during this time. In fact, he would be apprehended again by local law enforcement and then released several times for crimes he committed. These crimes would be stuff like assault with a deadly weapon and larceny. Robert Hansen, or the Butcher Baker, may have gotten away with even more murders had it not been for 17-year-old Cindy Paulson. Paulson drew attention in 1983 when she was found running afraid down 6th Avenue in his area, and she was barefoot and in handcuffs. After someone picked up the young girl and got her to safety, Paulson would go to the police with her story. But they didn't know if they should immediately believe her because she was frantic and the story was just so crazy. Paulson would tell the police that she was abducted by a man who had handcuffed her to his car, threatened her with a revolver, and then he would take her to his house. Here is where he would chain her up by the neck to a ceiling fan, where he would repeatedly rape and torture her. When he was done abusing Paulson, he would take her to a small local airport where he would attempt to load her onto his small bush plane. This would be when Paulson would make her successful attempt at escape, and she got away from him. But like a twisted version of Cinderella, her shoes would be left behind, and this would become an important piece of evidence. The police would take Paulson back to the airport, and she would identify his plane. They would find her shoes there, which would corroborate her story. There was even eyewitness testimony of the alleged event due to a security guard who would corroborate her story. The guard even took down his license plate, and the vehicle would come back to belonging to Robert Hansen. When the police would go to his house, they would see that his home would exactly match what Paulson had described it to look like. While all this was unfolding, troopers had been gathering information about other missing women in the area to see if they may be connected. An FBI profiler by the name of John Douglas, yes, if he sounds familiar, it is because he was the profiler portrayed on the Netflix show Mindhunter. Douglas would take the information the troopers had gathered, and he would create the following profile. The perpetrator would have low self-esteem. He would likely suffer from a speech impediment such as a stutter. He also would have a history of being rejected by women. And with his past run-ins with the law, the troopers would know exactly who he was. This FBI profile would be concreted as matching Hansen when a search warrant would be issued for his home. They would find trophies, including jewelry belonging to the missing women, his victims, a rifle that matched the bullet casings found at murder scenes of missing women, and a map with X's all over it that was found in Hansen's bed. At this point, they knew they had the right man, and during Hansen's interrogation, they would explain to him the next steps that they were taking. The officers planned to wait until the ground thawed in the area in the spring, and then they would take dogs out to each spot that were on this map that he had put X's on. And so they would go out into the Alaskan bush, and they were going to take dogs, and they were expecting to find more bodies and more bullet casings that could link him to crimes. When all of this was explained to him, ADA Frank Rothschild stated the following, quote, "As I sat there watching Hansen, there was a transformation that took place that was just amazing. His face got really red, and literally the hair on the back of his neck stood up. And that was when he changed, to my eye, from Bob the baker to Bob the serial killer. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at this guy thinking, there's the guy who killed all those people." End quote. Hansen would end up confessing to 17 murders in exchange for easier time throughout the criminal process, but he would only be convicted of 4. The police who worked on his case believe that he killed more than 17 women, probably. And at the time of his capture, Alaska did not have the death penalty on the table, but Hansen would even request that he not be kept in Alaska. He requested that he be imprisoned out of state, as he did not want to run into anyone who either knew him or one of his victims. And interestingly enough, he also asked to be kept out of the media. Hansen would end up being sentenced to life in prison plus 461 years. He would eventually die in prison in 2014 at the age of 75. Only 12 of his victims were ever located. The other bodies, unfortunately, never have been found. My heart goes out to all the families of all the victims, as nobody ever deserves that kind of fate. I know even though some of them may have been prostitutes or they may have been exotic dancers, that doesn't mean that there was nobody in their family that was ever looking for them or ever cared about them. And when we go over cases like this, we always want to remember the victims. I believe there was actually quite a bit of victims that were unidentified in this case still. Overall, it's really sad when you see that this kind of fate has fallen upon somebody. So Hollywood, like I said in the beginning, would end up coming out with several movies based off of Hansen's crimes. The most accurate depiction would be The Frozen Ground. This movie would include big name actors such as John Cusack. He would play Hansen. Nicolas Cage would play a detective, and then Vanessa Hudgens would end up playing Cindy Paulson. It's a pretty good movie, and I didn't originally connect the dots of who it was about until I started doing more research into this case. I had seen the movie before, but I don't know if I knew that it was based on a true story, because, you know, a lot of them say that, but they're very loosely based. I actually came upon this case I was looking up on my Instagram. I sometimes do true crime facts, and Robert Hansen was one. He came up as a killer who would hunt down his victims, and it basically said that a lot of people forget about him. And I don't know if it's because he's out of Alaska or if he just gets overshadowed by serial killers like John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer. But yeah, for the people who don't remember him or have never heard of him, I wanted to go over his case because it's quite scary that literally, I mean, a premise of a lot of scary movies is that people are hunting you down in the woods. And you really don't think about it, but a lot of them are probably based off of this man. So that is really all I have for you today on Robert Hansen. If you know anything else about him, or if there's anything you think I got wrong, as long as you respectfully message me, you can either email me to the email address right here, or you can comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I forgot to say at the beginning of this video. Don't forget to subscribe. I am planning on posting more often again. I'm hoping with the new format that I'm trying to do my videos in, I will be able to get them done in time. Honestly, the worst part of it for me is getting all the editing done because they take a tremendous amount of time to edit. But I'm hoping to get past that. I missed recording these, and I really like doing the research for them. I always encourage healthy discussions in the comment section, but just stay respectful to each other, and please be respectful to me as well. Down below, I will have all of the sources that I used for this video, so make sure to check them out. I will also have links to all of my social media channels, the one that has to do with this. I also have a social media channel that is my personal blog. I also started a WordPress blog. Well, I started a while ago, but I'm restarting to post about it. Now, that has nothing to do with true crime. It's more about professionalism and trying to make the best out of your life. But if you'd like to check that out, I will also link that down below. I might just do my link tree, to be honest. That might be the easiest way to do it. But yeah, make sure to check all of that out and to follow me, because I'm gonna try and stay consistent and be back and do these videos for you. Thank you for coming to watch this one, and remember that the world's most dangerous minds hide in the most unlikely places. Stay safe.